Hey, Bridge fam, this service is brought to you by hot cocoa, fuzzy socks, and the 5 loaves of bread that you bought yesterday. You know who you are. Today is a snow day. Feels like just 2 weeks ago we were all online, and here we are again. But we're gonna pivot a little bit today, and sort of kind of pause our series on the Lord's Prayer and try something a little different. It'll probably stretch us, and for some of us, maybe even feel a bit uncomfortable, but I think it's going to be really good for us together. So, when we talk about the Lord's Prayers, we talked about last week, each line tells us something about God and how we are to relate to Him. And I want us to really understand this. The Lord's Prayer is way less a formula and more of a framework. I think that's important for us to remember. And to make this more interactive, today I want to incorporate some prayers and some postures. I know many of you maybe are watching with your kids or roommates. I would encourage you, even as uncomfortable as some of this might be, to actually practice some of these things. Stretch yourself a little bit and try something new. Postures are a way of engaging our whole bodies, our whole selves, mind, body, and spirit. And if you need to pause this video or this podcast in order to actually practice some of these things, I'd encourage you to do that. As always, you can go to bridge.tv/prayer for more information. But like we talked about last week, and this is, I think, really important before we dive in, the aim of prayer isn't the things God does, but God Himself. That's our aim. That is our goal, is not to become better at prayer. It's intimacy with God. As Clement of Alexandria said, prayer is keeping company with God. And we remember, like we talked about last week in Romans 8, that even when we don't know what to say, that the Spirit of God intercedes on our behalf. So even if you don't feel like you have the right words, simply be still, be present with God as loving Father. So I want to kind of explore this line by line and offer maybe a brief observation and then a prayer prompt and a prayer posture. But before we do, one of my favorite versions of the Lord's Prayer actually comes from this book right here, the Jesus Storybook Bible. So, kids, some of you might recognize this. I want to read the verses that we taught on last week and then the Lord's Prayer, and then we'll dive in. It says, in those days, there were some extra super holy people, at least that's what they thought, and they were called Pharisees. Every day they would stand out in the middle of the streets and pray out in extra super holy voices. They really weren't praying so much as just showing off. They used lots of special words that were so clever that no one actually knew what they meant. People walking by would stop and stare, which might sound rude, except that's exactly what the extra super holy people wanted. They wanted everyone to say, look at them, they're so holy. God must love those people best. Now, you and I both know they were wrong. God doesn't just love holy people, but the people walking by weren't so sure. Perhaps you did have to be really clever or good or important for God to love you. Perhaps you had to know lots of difficult, clever words to speak to God. So one day, Jesus taught people how to pray. He said, when you pray, don't pray like those extra super holy people. They think that if they say a lot of words, God will hear them, but it's not because you're so clever or good or so important that God will listen to you. God listens to you because He loves you. Do you know that God is always listening to you? Do you know that God can hear the quietest whisper deep inside your heart even before you started to say it? Because God knows exactly what you need even before you ask Him, Jesus told them. You see, God just can't wait to give you all that you need. So you don't need to use long words or special words. You don't have to use a special voice. You just have to talk and listen. So when you pray, pray in your own normal voice, just like you were talking to someone you love very much, kind of like this. Hey, Dad, we want to know you and be close to you. Please show us how. Make everything in the world right again, and in our hearts too. Do what is best, just like you do in heaven, and please do it down here too. Please give us everything we need today. Forgive us for doing wrong, for hurting you. Forgive us just as we forgive other people when they hurt us. Rescue us. We need you. We don't want to keep running away and hiding from you. Keep us safe from our enemies. You are strong, God. You can do whatever you want. You are in charge now and forever and for always. We think you're great. Amen. You see, Jesus was showing people that God would always love them with a never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. So they didn't need to hide anymore or be afraid or ashamed. They could stop running away from God. and they could run to him instead, as a little child runs into her daddy's arms. So for the next couple of minutes, I want us to kind of have that sort of posture together, that we're not just simply learning some kind of skill or practice, but how to run to the arms of the Father. Now, the first line in the Lord's Prayer, many of us know it, is Our Father in heaven. Jesus invites us to approach God not as some distant deity, but as a loving Father. He begins with relationship, not a ritual. He's not a distant deity, but a loving Father who invites all of us close. This is the foundation of prayer, by the way, relationship. I love the way Martin Luther put it. He said, prayer is not overcoming God's reluctance, but laying hold of his willingness. Prayer is an invitation. So here's what I'd love for you to do. We do this every week at the bridge. A simple prayer posture, open hands, palms up, wherever you're watching or listening from, to assume this posture. This posture symbolizes receiving and letting go and the openness to God as Father. And so here's your prayer prompt as we pause together. The prompt is this: to pray together out loud in your own way. Father, thank you for loving us and being in control of everything. Help us to trust you as your children. You can take that prompt now in your own words. God, thank you for loving us as your children and for being in control of everything that we see and don't see. Now, the next line says, Hallowed be your name. Hallowed simply means holy, which is another way of talking about something being set apart and worthy of reverence. Jesus reminds us that we not only pray to God as Father, but we are to honor God's name in all that we say and do. So here's sort of the prayer prompt for you. If you're comfortable or able, I'd invite you to actually kneel. And if that doesn't work for you, maybe even just kind of bow your head. This posture represents humility and reverence for God's holiness. So here's the prayer prompt. Spend a few moments naming the qualities of God that you are thankful for. You could say something like, God, you are good. You are faithful. You are wise. If you're with people, let them share one thing that makes God worthy of honor. Now, the next line says, Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This line, in a lot of ways, invites us to surrender our plans and invite God's rule, his justice, his love, and his peace into our world and into our lives. So here's the posture I want to challenge you with. The posture is hands raised high. I know this might be uncomfortable for some of us, but I want to encourage you that wherever you're at, wherever you're watching from, lift your hands high. This posture symbolizes surrender and inviting God to reign over every part of our lives. Here's the prayer prompt for all of us. We could maybe pray something like, God, we want what you want. Bring your kingdom and your will into our family, into our homes, into our community, and our world. Pray something along those lines in your own words, in your own context now. Now, the next line says, Give us today our daily bread. Jesus here is reminding us that God actually cares about our daily needs, both physical and spiritual. Daily bread points to God's provision, teaching us not only dependence, but gratitude. So here's the posture I want to challenge you with. It's hands cupped together like this, like you're holding a bowl. This posture symbolizes dependence on and receiving from God. So I want you to, wherever you're watching from, if you're with people, take turns thanking God for what he has provided for you and asking what you actually need today. Share something that you're thankful that God has provided, and then ask God for what you need, whether it's food or courage or peace. You could simply say, God, thank you for, and then God, please provide. So take a couple minutes and just voice those before God now. Now, the next line says, Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. This reminds us of our need for God's forgiveness and the call to extend forgiveness to others. It connects our relationship with God to our relationship with people. I love the way that C.S. Lewis put it. He said, To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. The bottom line here is that forgiven people are forgiving people. So here's the posture. I want to encourage you to take your hands and place it over your heart. This posture symbolizes seeking forgiveness as well as offering it to others. And then here's the prayer prompt for us. Just spend a moment in quiet reflection and ask, is there someone that I need to forgive? And perhaps you could even say, God, please forgive me for, and help me to forgive blank. Take a moment now and just voice those together. And then lastly, it says, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. This is a prayer both for guidance and protection. We ask God to keep us away from things that could harm us spiritually and to strengthen us when we face challenges. So here's the posture. The posture is hands out as if like pushing something away. The posture symbolizes resisting temptation and seeking God's protection. Here's your prayer prompt, something like this. God, protect us from anything that could pull us away from you and help us to follow you and to stand strong for what is right. So with this posture, I encourage you, pray out loud something along those lines. Now, as we close, we remember that the Lord's Prayer is not simply about something we recite or even prayer prompts or prayer postures. It's an invitation to connect with God, not just right now on a Sunday, but with every aspect of our life. These postures remind us that prayer isn't just simply about the words that we say, but about offering our entire lives to God. Because I actually think this prayer builds intentionally. Because if we don't see God as Father and Holy, we'll actually never trust Him or surrender our lives to His will. And an unsurrendered will leads to a life of self-reliance, which leaves us striving for our own bread. And that kind of living leads us to a frantic, hurried life. And that is exactly the kind of life that we need deliverance from. I love the way that Max Lucado put it. He said, our prayers may be awkward, our attempts may be feeble, but since the power of prayer is in the one who hears it and not in the one who says it, our prayers do make a difference. So we remember, like we talked about last week, God is way more interested in our sincerity than our stage presence. It means we can come to God honestly and boldly, as John Ortberg put it. It's better to be an honest mess before God than a dishonest saint. So to close, one of my favorite thinkers is a man named Dallas Willard, and he wrote this version of the Lord's Prayer in his own words, and it just has always resonated with me. He said, "Dear Father, always near us. May your name be treasured and loved. May your rule be completed in us. May your will be done here on earth in just the way it is done in heaven. Give us today the things we need today, and forgive us our sins and impositions on you, as we are forgiving all who in any way offend us. Please don't put us through trials, but deliver us from everything bad, because you are the one in charge. And you have all the power. And the glory, too, is all yours forever, which is just the way we want it." We love you guys. Stay safe and warm, and we will see you next week.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us on our YouTube channel today. I hope that you felt the welcome home of Christ right through your screen. Here we believe that the gospel is good news worth sharing. So if you'd like to share this stream with your friends and family, you can also subscribe to this channel, and you can use @BridgeChurchTN. Also, if you'd like to give, there's a link in the description there you can click, and it'll walk you through all the steps. And if you'd like to stay connected with us, you can simply head on over to bridge.tv. Hope to see you again soon.